What's up, everybody? I'm Santa Bearded Matt Brody, and this is Simply Must Go, and welcome to episode 2 of our budget YJ build. In this episode, we are going to do so much, but if you're not familiar with why we're doing the budget YJ build, I'll link up here, but basically I'm in a competition with Force Motoring to see who can build the best 10K YJ. Now, we're starting this project off doing something pretty awesome. We're changing out my stock axle to a Ford 88 axle. And in doing that, we're also going to do a bunch of other things because, well, this project went down a bunch of rabbit holes, and we'll walk through all of that. But for now, let's get Emo over to my buddy's shop and get started. All right, guys, so this is Rob, and Rob is my local go-to YJ mechanic guy. That's a good title for you,
Fair.
I suppose.
Yeah.
Fair? Yeah.
I like to break things.
Yeah. And then fix things.
Yeah, well, when you break as much as I break, you have to know how to fix it or be poor.
There you go. So I've brought Rob the Ford 88. He's going to start prepping it, getting things. Well, you tell people what exactly you're going to do, because you'll explain it cleaner than I will.
So basically what we're going to do is we're going to tear off the few remaining unnecessary things. We're going to pull the brake lines off, and we start laying out the initial measurements, trying to figure out where everything's going to live, where it needs to live. After that's done, we'll prep the surfaces, get everything, all the paint removed, ready for welding. Then we'll get you to bring your YJ over, snatch that axle out, hang this one in its place, get its final measurements dialed in, make sure the pinion angle's where it needs to be, and then start tacking everything, pull the axle out, finish welding, paint, run some new brake lines, really jazz up the place a bit and make it look nice.
Nice. It's gonna be mwah, magnifique. So Rob's gonna get busy. We've got all the brackets and parts in here that he'll check out, get doing his thing. And while he's doing that, I gotta make a run to Ohio for something else. All right, so I made it back home. I've brought Emo to Rob's sort of home shop. He's back there getting ready. We're gonna put Emo on the lift, and we're gonna start working on getting this Ford 88 put in. I'm so excited about this. The axle I purchased off of Facebook Marketplace was listed as already being set up and ready for a YJ, which I had taken as a sign from the universe that they wanted me to have this axle. But, as I would discover, not everything was as it seemed. We'd go a lot further on this project than just a simple axle swap. Maybe this sign says it all, but more on that later. For now, Rob was taking initial measurements of the factory axle to give us a baseline for the 88. Then it was time to start prepping the new axle. Rob needed to remove the paint on the axle to get a clean surface to weld to. Quick tip, using a weld-through primer when you're done will give you the protective benefits of paint, but allow you to weld the brackets without worrying about any flash rusting. While that dried, we started removing the drive shaft, brake lines, and shocks from the old axle.
Shocko delito.
I tried to clean it up for you. I did. I really did.
See, this is the parts that he washed.
I've decided, and this may be controversial, but we're not going to put the track bar back on the Ford 88. Track bars on the YJs are somewhat unnecessary. They were basically there to appease government regulations. It's really hard for stuff to go sideways when you have the leaf springs. So a lot of people I know have taken off the track bars front and back and don't have any issues. We're going to run this without track bars in the rear, at least for now, and not have to worry about putting that back on. Removing the track bar wasn't easy, but a good dose of Flamin' Hot loosened it right up.
Yes. There we go.
That wasn't the only thing that needed a little extra encouragement, but luckily everything came off without too much issue. Except for when we forgot to disconnect the passenger side e-brake cable. Once the Dana 35 was out, it was time to start test fitting the Ford 88. And you might be wondering why we didn't just drop the springs and make our lives simpler, but our thought process was keeping as much in place meant less variation in trying to put it back. So we kept it this way,
and manhandled the axle into place. Rob had pulled the drain plug and found what looked like little metal shaving, so we decided to pop the diff cover just to double check all the gears and bearings.
Oh, it's burnt. Everything. Oh, the spider gears look good. I don't see anything. A little bit of surface rust, but nothing major.
Clean rag.
Less than clean rag.
With the axle back on the spring, it was time to start measuring and centering it. A process that took a little bit of time because we wanted to make sure we got it just right.
These are just going to snug up in place, not the final assembly. That way, as we set the pinion angle and everything like that, we verify our drive shaft angle. Right now, we've got everything generally mocked up where it's essentially going to be at once we start tacking everything in place. A couple of key things we're looking for right now is we're getting ready to check our pinion angle, which to do that we're going to have to put the wheels and tires back on the rear axle, kind of set it down on the ground, and then we'll get under the Jeep while it's on the ground with its weight on and set the pinion angle there. The big things we're looking for right now though is we're checking the measurements between the leaf spring and the brake drum on both sides to ensure that they are the same. The biggest thing you got to make sure is once you swap these to the 8.8, your pinion location is going to offset about 2.5 inches from stock. So you want to verify all your measurements along the way. A couple of the key things I've measured is from the differential housing to the spring perch on both sides. They're not going to be the same number because your driver's side axle shaft is considerably longer than your passenger side axle shaft. But to verify that we're center line with the rest of the Jeep, we use the measurements from the outside of the spring to the brake housing at the same location on both sides and verify that those numbers are the same. And right now they are good, so we're good.
We ended up having to cut off a little bit of the leaf spring mount because it was too long and interfering with the back of the leaf springs.
So right now we're just snugging these up, getting them generally where they're supposed to be, but we still have the ability to twist the axle as needed.
We got this kind of mocked up. We're gonna get it lowered down, really measure everything, make sure it's right, and then he's gonna tack it all up, and then we're gonna, I guess, take it off, and you're gonna fully weld it after that. So
Yes,
it's still kind of a process, but that's the plan.
The standard slip yoke drive shaft, the output shaft of the transfer case and the yoke of the pinion need to be at the same angle or as close as you can get it. Now if you had a slip yoke eliminator, then your drive shaft angle your drive shaft angle would change. Basically you would point the pinion directly at the tail of the output shaft. But since we're not using a slip yoke eliminator, they need to be running parallel essentially. We are sitting at 7 and 7 on the output shaft and on the drive shaft, the pinion. So it looks like that's about where we want to leave it. So we're going to get ready to slide out and throw some hot glue at it.
All right, so Rob got everything tacked into place. Now we got to pull the axle back out, get it on the table over here so we can fully weld everything in.
This time we decided it would be much easier to drop the leaf springs and take the axle out that way.
Rotate it slightly. Perfect.
So this is a great time to stop and tell you about our sponsor, Onyx Off-Road. Onyx is an awesome off-road app. It lets you track your adventures, so as you go out, you can record exactly where you go, you can mark your campsites, all those normal things that some of these great GPS apps do. The other thing that Onyx has is built-in trails. So some of my very favorite trails that we do are already built into Onyx. Things like the Scar, the Georgia Traverse, and a whole lot more. And more trails are being added all the time. Another thing that I love about Onyx is that they're in the community. Every show I go to, someone from Onyx is there being in the community, learning what we need, adding updates. That's an absolutely awesome app. If you guys haven't tried it out, there'll be a link down in the description. You can save 20% off your membership. Give it a try if you're interested. This is a great time for me to stop and tell you about a couple other things. The first is that I'm posting live updates on this build on Instagram. So if you're not already following me on Instagram, there'll be a link down below, but it's at the Matt Brody, not simply must go, the Matt Brody on Instagram. And you can follow along in almost real time of what we're doing with this build and a bunch of other stuff. I'd love to have you on Instagram too. It's a great place to DM me questions and things like that. So if you're not already involved and following on Instagram, that would be awesome. Another thing I want to mention is that someone mentioned in one of the comments that I should ask the community, my followers, if they wanted to participate in this build and make it sort of a group project, right? A community build. And I thought that was an absolutely awesome idea. So if you've got something that you want to include in this build, or maybe you're a craftsman of some kind, you make custom things like, I don't know, custom shift handles, who knows, right? Like if you've got something like that and you want it to be a part of this build, let's talk. Go to Instagram, DM me, and I'd love to see if we can figure out a way to fit that into the build. Also, if you want to support this channel and support the build, I'm also doing a YouTube membership, and you can sign up in YouTube for that, and that really helps support the channel and helps us have the budget to do really fun things like this. So, you remember the other day when we pulled the drain plug and Rob was like, that doesn't look good, and then we kind of looked through things and we were like, okay, things look okay. Well, we brought the gear expert, Dan, over. It's not okay. So, Dan, why don't you explain to the audience here why buying off of Facebook is buying off of Facebook?
It's sketchy, you know. Once you're in here and doing stuff, you kind of look around. So when I pulled it off, you can see the nice markings of failure on the carrier race. It's all pitted and looks pretty bad. First thing I noticed, though, was there was a buildup of sludge, because once you take the carriers off, because you can't clean that as well until you pull it off. So if the person who got it from cleaned it, they sprayed out, they're not going to get behind the bearing. It's got to be done. It's got to be rebuilt. So that's the gist of it all.
So we've got to rebuild what all that has to be rebuilt then, I guess.
I mean, not rebuilt. It's, you know, a rebuild is new bearings, pinion, 2 carrier bearings. You know, when you put it in, you pretty much make sure everything's copacetic. So the shim should remain the same, but with new bearings. I noticed also when I first got in here, I put a gauge on it, and the backlash was a little bit looser than it should be, but that also makes sense with the bearings that bad. So, and the unit just did plop out. Sometimes it happens from the factory, but I just noticed that it was very loose and it came around, which it's nice that it comes out like that easy, because I've fought with them many times. But bottom line is new bearings, and we'll get you back together.
And then what were you saying about the seals on the
you know, just that's the rabbit hole you go down to with axles. You get a junkyard axle. Oh, this has to be rebuilt. Well, you know, you're right there. The bearings out, and I just pulled a chunk of something out. You can just tell that the seals are a little bit older. I put my finger in earlier, and yeah, there's just garbage inside there. So I would suggest, you know, new wheel, axle, seals, and bearings. You know, while you have it out, you clean out the tube like you're doing a rifle. You know, you just go through with a bunch of rags and pushing it out like doing it up and then put it all back together. That's the adventure it is. The other pinion side, carrier side, no pitting or anything, but it is discolored, so I think it's probably been pretty hot. It's run hot, so either low oil or, what's this out of an exploder?
Yeah, exploder.
Okay, so it's not going fast enough to really burn it up for a speedway, but it is definitely in a bad shape.
That's got the caramelization.
Yeah, you can see that's just metal mush.
So, what that ultimately means now is that there is a delay, I suppose, in putting this all back together until I can get those parts and let Dan do his magic. All right, so it's a little after Christmas, actually the New Year now. We've taken a little bit of time off working on this for the holidays and stuff, but I've given all the parts to Dan, who kind of worked on the whole carrier assembly and stuff, and Rob's been working on a couple of things here and there. Today we're just basically going to clean the heck out of this thing so that we can get ready to finally put it back together and get it mounted on the Jeep.
So while we were busy cleaning the axle, Dan started rebuilding the gears with all new bearings. This was a really interesting process to watch, and one I'm glad that I had an expert like Dan doing for me.
So right now you're just trying to find the right size shims and stuff?
Yeah, I'm putting everything at the setup bearing just so I don't. Because generally you probably do what you came out since we're not re-gearing it, but I want to make sure everything is still copacetic. I put in some setup bearings. I'm just going by seeing. Right now I'm just seeing what the backlash is. I want to do a pattern setup to make sure the pinion and new bearings are fine for depth. But I'm just, when I first got in here, I had a backlash of 0.011. Just touch out of spec, but it also could have been because the bearings are worn. So I'm just going through now.
While Dan went back and forth trying to find the right shims, Rob was busy installing brand new brake lines.
Yeah, 15. It was that, because I thought it was.
When you put it together, it was at 15.
Yep.
Is 15 the max or?
16's the max, so it's a little.
So we're doing 60 foot-pounds?
Yep. There you go. Double tap. There we go. You hear the clicky click? That's backlash. That's between the ring gear and the pinion.
So what does the yellow and not yellow actually mean on this then?
That's the wear. So when it's rubbed off, that's the gear actual contact. And you can go by, you can see where it's taken and just went to the next tooth over.
With everything in place and looking good, it was time to replace the setup bearings with the actual bearings.
Oh, I'm not sitting on that. So on this, since everything's on there, once I crush it,
Yeah.
I get to the preload, that's it.
I got you. I'm just.
Fine still. For getting there. Okay, now we're getting to nitty gritty. 19-inch pounds. So this little guy here, you put it on and you read it. I'm at about 10. So this is where it gets tricky because you just got to go little bit, and pull it apart again. Not fun, but that's the way you got to do it though. Didn't change much. There's a natural preload on it for, with everything in there, so it hasn't really started to get there yet. The crush sleeve, when you crush it, you're crushing like shim size, so you have to go just a little bit at a time, or you put too much in there, you're screwed. Like 15 greed got. I'm not playing any more greed there, so that there is done.
With the preload set within spec, it was time to reinstall the carrier into the axle.
Very excited.
With the carrier installed, it was time to install the axle bearings. Given that this axle was a Facebook find, I decided to go with the upgraded lube locker gasket, just in case we had to take off the diff cover multiple times.
It's a completely dry gasket, means you don't have to put any RTV or anything like that on it. And the great thing is, if you're in and out of your differential a lot, it's reusable as well. So you can pop it on and off and it'd be good.
It was starting to look like a real axle again.
All right, so the axle is it's basically done. It's time to go put it back underneath the Jeep. So we're gonna move it up and get it installed, and hopefully everything works. But this is hopefully pretty much the end of it, and then we'll have to do some fine tuning. But good luck.
Spoiler alert, this would not be the end. With the axle installed, it was time to fill up the diff with oil and remount the tires. We started by testing the Jeep by rolling it back and forth a few times. Then we lifted it in the air to test the Jeep at full droop, and there we found a problem.
I mean, realistically, we could grind a little bit out of that and it'll never touch. I'm just not the biggest fan of doing that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because one side of the yoke is like, I don't know, a 32nd of an inch thicker than the other side. So it touches that side when it's at full sag. All right, so basically what's happening is the flat portion of the cast yoke on this side spins around pretty freely, and then when you get to this side where the casting's thicker, it's hitting. So a couple of things we can do. A, undo it all, increase the angle of the pinion angle slightly to overcome that, or we can just get rid of these numbers right here and clear it.
Or you also mentioned shimming it.
Or we could come in, because YJs are already shimmed at their leaf springs, so if we add a little bit of shim to that, it will also increase the pinion angle.
So given that we were having this binding issue, I had an idea. something that I was thinking about doing anyway, which was adding boomerang shackles to Emo in hopes that that lift would change the pinion angle enough that we wouldn't have to worry about that binding issue. Well, since I was going to have to take the shackles off, one of the issues is on the driver's side, the bolt that they put in from the factory is backwards, meaning you can't take that bolt out without either cutting it or dropping the gas tank. It also just so happened that my gas tank skid plate was a rusted disaster. And so I decided what we're going to do, we're going to drop the skid plate, we're going to put a new skid plate on, and in the process, we'll have ample opportunity to put on new boomerang shackles in the front and back, and hopefully that would fix our pinion angle.
Uh-oh. Yeah, there she goes. There it goes. Goodness. Said you got new bolts, right?
Yep. Just in case.
Yeah, well, just in case it's here, and apparently it's a thing. There we go. This should come out now. So, first things first, let's find a strap and hold the gas tank into gas tank places. I distinctly remember somebody telling me they washed this. They lied. So many lies. Jesus. Yeah, it's totally washed.
To be fair, it's really hard to wash in between the gas tank and the skid plate.
No, it's not. Drive in a lake. Or a river. There's the right way. There's the fast way.
Which way is this, Rob?
The fast way. The right way would be to take the gas tank down with it. That way you can inspect all your fittings and everything like that. Just judging off the past fittings that we've dealt with, they're probably perfect. Nope. The opposite of that. Tetanus, here we come. Let's hold on. Oh, you silly tank straps. Son of a gun. These are like the biggest rolled pins ever. That's one. You're thinking about it. Ow. Ow, daggone, that hurt. Alright. Huh. Yeah, I don't know if those are going to rethread or not. They're pretty not good. We'll hit them with a wire wheel and see if they clean up enough to reuse, but I'm not making any promises.
After removing the skid plate and the tank straps, it was time to start installing the boomerang shackles.
There we go.
I chose to go with larger 1.5-inch boomerang shackles with the hopes that that much distance would help increase the pinion angle, but also give me a little extra lift and a little extra room, because I'm hoping to go with 35-inch tires.
Jesus. How much bolt do you need? Just in case you're running like 3 times the amount of frame you need to be running, or what? There we go. Like that. Okay. There we go. Oh,
How do those look?
those are pretty roached. No, they're good. See, they're designed to fall apart in your hand for maximum ride comfort.
So this was a needed thing anyway.
Yes, this was definitely a needed thing. Those aren't right. We may have an issue. Oh, wait, here's some. Nope, those are probably the same size. Huh. I'm no math magician, but I don't think that's right. don't believe these do work on a YJ. Because none of them are the right size.
So it looks like the bushings I bought off of Amazon, which say for a YJ, aren't working. And we don't know if they're not working because they're Amazon wrong parts, or with these different springs on there, if these are somehow a different size than the stock. We're not really sure. We're going to have to find new bushings for that though. So yet another thing that delays us just a little bit.
So this is you, and this is the guy she told you not to worry about.
So as it turns out, the bolts that come with the boomerang shackles are just way too long. I mean, you can see up here, like they're sticking out like 2 inches more than they need to, at least a solid inch more than they need to. So these are 5-inch bolts that came with this, and this is pretty common with boomerang shackles. It just doesn't really work on the YJ, so I went and I got the same grade 8 half-inch bolt with a coarse thread pattern in 4 inches, and we're going to replace all of them with 4-inch bolts instead. It's just going to work better. And now that I thought about it, I remember when I took my other Jeep, the Jurassic Park one, to have the boomerang shackles put on at a shop, they mentioned that those bolts were too long and they had to shorten it. I didn't think about it much at the time. I was like, all right, whatever. Now I know why. So if you get boomerang shackles, you're probably going to need to get shorter 4-inch bolts rather than the 5 that typically come with them. So another thing we've learned is that the bushings on the front of the rear leaf spring are a different size than the bushings on the rear of the leaf spring. And so, yeah, we got to figure those out too. So the leaf spring bushings were throwing us for sort of a loop. So I decided to call Rough Country and see if they would give me like a product number or something that I could take to my local parts store to figure out what the correct bushings were. And Rough Country told me that the local parts store would not have what I needed, and I needed to order those bushings directly from them. So I did, and while I waited for those to arrive, we finished installing the skid plate.
They say there's an easy way and a right way to do things. And in this case, I think we chose the wrong way and the harder way to put on the gas tank skid plates and to put on the tank straps. We fought with this for a while, but eventually we made it work. Are there easier ways to do this? Probably, but this is the way that we did it.
Ow!
Don't do that.
Son of a gun.
So getting the gas tank skid plate back up was honestly kind of a pain in the butt. So it took both of us, so I couldn't really film. That was a pain. That was way harder than it feels like it should have been.
I think we figured out the hardest way to do that
Probably.
ever.
Don't do it that way. So part of the reason for going ahead and doing the skid plate was because it dropped the tank, which meant we could get this bolt out without having to cut it, because that's a pain in the butt. And in all of the stuff to get the tank back in, we totally forgot to do that. And so now we are still having to cut the bolt, because, you know, that's par for the course.
So with that bolt removed, we could install the boomerang shackles on the other side, minus the brand new bushings.
Let's go.
There we go.
We decided to put everything back together, even with the old worn out bushings, because the hope was that these boomerang shackles were going to give us enough of a lift and angle for the pinion that it would clear the binding that it was having, and we wouldn't have to do any grinding.
I really thought that was going to click.
Oh. It spins now. It was binding up completely before. We couldn't do that. So it's like 98% there.
Yeah, it's almost there. Again, this is something you'll never notice when it's on the ground, but when it's at full hang, which if you're ever at full hang under power,
Yeah.
things have gone wrong anyway. Like, that is 11 degrees. That's like 10.5 degrees.
Yeah, so it's like half a degree is all the issue.
100%. Like, so generally what you want to happen when you're using a traditional U-joke, it's a joke at this point, U-joint slip yoke, you want your transfer case output shaft and your pinion to be at roughly the same degrees, like on parallel, I should say. They shouldn't be facing each other. They should be on parallel. Well, currently, the U-joint is at roughly 8 degrees. And our completely off unsprung weight or degree on this is 10 degrees. So we're right where we're supposed to be. There's a lot of people out there that are way more in depth on this than I am and explain pinion angle in way smarter ways than I can. But generally speaking, plus or minus a couple of degrees, that's what you want. And that's what we've developed. However, on a completely unsprung weight, we're running into a slight binding issue due to the thickness of the yoke on the flange. So, that's where we're at, and it's irritating. I want to say I'm mad, but I'm not mad. I'm more astonished than anything. Like, if I were writing a silly TV auto drama, I would come up with, oh, you're half a degree off, it'll never work. Knowing good and well how far things can be off and completely work normally. Yet here I am, half a degree off, and it doesn't work. I want my money back.
So given that, we could do two things. We could grind out the yoke, or I could get what we think are larger shims, because we're not really sure exactly what size. I think those are like maybe 6 degree shims. We're going to go to like an 8 degree shim, which would be more than enough because we are literally half a degree off. And all of this only matters in a scenario that probably will never happen, which would be completely unsprung weight in the back, right? Like, the chances of that happening are so slim. But we're going to do it right. And what?
And power. You have to be completely unsprung in the rear and giving power to the axle.
Yeah. So the chances of that happening realistically are 0, right? Because I'm not doing crazy stuff with it. Well, we'll see how crazy we do with this. But chances of that happening are slim. But we're still going to try to do it right. All right, so theoretically, we are in the home stretch of this axle swap. I've got bigger shims. They should be an 8 degree shim rather than a 6 degree shim, which should give us 2 degrees difference. And since we were like half a degree off, should be plenty, theoretically, fingers crossed. The other issue is the bushings that I ordered from Rough Country came in. We looked at them, and they look more or less identical to all the bushings that I've already gotten and look nothing like the bushings that were in the leaf springs from Rough Country to start with. So really not sure how that's going to play out until we get them in there, but I don't think they're going to work. So this is... Why?
So we started the process of disassembling everything again so that we could put in the larger shim and try to figure out the correct bushings.
Talk to me, Goose.
We got a stripped leaf spring bolt.
Because nothing's freaking easy.
So, with another setback that would require ordering parts and waiting for them to arrive, we turned our attention to the leaf spring bushings. Ironically, the first bushing that we tried to pull the other day happened to be the only bushing that would come out easily, which led us into a false sense of security, but also made us realize that maybe we were looking at this the wrong way.
All right, so here's what we've learned, right? One of the great things about working on this stuff is that you learn something every time. So we finally got the leaf spring down, and we were trying to get these bushings out, and they were falling apart, and we were like, and then the new bushings that we got, they didn't fit. But As it turns out, the metal ring that was inside of there also had to come out. So the ones that were in there had a bushing inside and then this metal ring inside of the leaf spring. You take this metal ring out and all of a sudden everything starts to fit again. So what we've learned is these have to come out too, not something that I knew and we had to look up, but this was the cause of the problems. The metal ring, which we thought was part of the leaf spring, not part of the leaf spring, part of the bushing, had to come out. Everything's been replaced, so now we can do that. We've run into some other things we got to fix, but we've got bushings, brand new bushings, back in the leaf springs. So that problem is now solved.
The bushings that were in the leaf springs were actually press-in bushings, which meant in order to get them out, we had to kind of drill out all the rubber on the interior side and then take a sawzall and cut out the interior metal ring and bend it out of the way and then push it out. It was kind of a process, but once we got the hang of it, it went pretty quickly. My youngest son Will just got his driver's license and he's dying to get an XJ, so I thought this was a great time for him to turn some wrenches and get his hands a little bit dirty, because we know that's coming in the future. And with new leaf spring tie bolts acquired, Rob began installing the 8-degree shims. We put a thin layer of foam tape around the shim to keep the aluminum shim from reacting to the steel leaf springs, just as a precaution.
Yay, drop the bolt.
We were finally ready to torque the U-bolts down for the final time.
Oh man, you got a good 1/16 of an inch now. None of the touchings.
With the Jeep back together and our clearance issues solved, it was time to quickly bleed the brakes and bring it down off the lift.
So if you like this video, if you want to follow along with this project, hit the thumbs up button and hit subscribe. It helps out the channel a lot. Love to have you here. If you've got any questions about this, what we did with the axle swap or where we're going, whatever, leave those down in the comments. Let me know what you think of what we did. I'm sure you found some things that we probably could have done better. You may even have suggestions of other things that we can do on this budget build before we go to Jeep Beach and compete. So let me know those as well. But anyway, until next time, guys, God bless, and we'll see you on the trails. All right, I have made it to Ohio, and by now you are probably asking yourself, why did you drive almost 12 hours through the mountains, through the snow, to Ohio? And the answer is, for that.